we're on to our second talk of the afternoon. Now we have Shusma, Josh, and Andrea from BSI speaking to us. Shusma is a data scientist at BSI who has experience working with different facets of AI, computer vision, natural language processing, and lately large language models to help solve real-world client problems. As an AI ethics thought leader, she has collaborated with startups and specializes in testing AI models to adapt their technology for algorithmic auditing. Josh has a broad range of experience across data and analytics, including establishing and growing data science teams. This has included automation projects for large international corporations and rolling out large-scale analytical platforms across the UK government. At BSI, Josh leads the marketing data science team, who have recently been established to improve client experience and maximize the effectiveness and efficiency of BSI's marketing activity. And last but not least, we have Andrea, who is a machine learning scientist in the Advanced Analytics Department of Generali Insurance, a bioinformatician at the European Institute of Oncology, and a research engineer at the International School for Advanced Studies. Throughout the past few years, Andrea's focus has been on applying state-of-the-art machine learning techniques to solve various problems in different areas of science and technology. So this is gearing up to be a very interesting talk. So on to Josh, please.
Brilliant, thank you. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session. So, Society 5.0. I think perhaps similar to the mystery meet in our Bratfurst earlier, you might be wondering, what exactly is Society 5.0? Perhaps unlike our Bratwursts, we're going to be digging in to understand how the sausage is made. And I am delighted to be joined by experts in the field, Shusma and Andrea here, who are going to explore the key ingredients that make up Society 5.0. But before we dive in, I think it's worth introducing ourselves as BSI. And we've done this before, but it'd be really interesting to gauge the audience. So if you could put your hands up if you've heard of BSI. Great, a fair number. Okay, if you could keep your hands up, sorry, if you could keep your hands up if you knew BSI was something to do with standards. Okay, so a few have dropped down. And keep your hands up if you know around anything about our royal charter, or the fact that we don't have shareholders, the fact that we're purpose-driven. There's a few remaining, actually, better than last time, which is fantastic, but it is heavily weighted towards BSI employees. Actually, not all of you have your hands up. It's good. So I think it's worth just a bit of a background to BSI then. So like I mentioned, we are quite unique in the way we're set up. So we have a royal charter. And that means instead of worrying about maximizing shareholder wealth, we don't have any shareholders. So we're free to focus in on our purpose. And that is essentially, we want the world to be sustainable in its fullest sense. And that breaks down into, of course, sustainability, well-being in society, and digital trust. And in order to accomplish that, we work with a community of over 12,500 people worldwide. So that's us. We are hiring, so if you're interested, if that sounds good, please do talk to us. We might not have time for questions today, but please do come and say hi at the booth. It's been great talking to some of you already today. So Society 5.0. What is Society 5.0? So it's actually an idea that originated in Japan and has been adopted by the Japanese government in 2017. It's a sort of a forward-looking vision of what society could be when it's driven by AI. But I think perhaps the best way to explain it is to look backwards. So if we think about the very first society, sort of hunter-gatherers using sticks and stones as primitive tools, what came next? What was the big leap, I suppose, between Society 1 and Society 2? I suppose it's the move into agriculture and using animals for farming and for food. And I suppose you can kind of work your way through that progression to where we are today. Society 4, the information age. So instead of sticks and stones, we have silicon and semiconductors. So Society 5.0 is the next step. And I'm sure a lot of us have probably thought about this. There's a lot happening in AI. What happens next? And it's a really positive view around what could happen if we get this right. So Society 5.0 is a human-centered society where the cyberspace and the physical space will merge, and we will be able to use this to sort of fundamentally resolve societal problems and in a way that is absent of location, age, sex, or language. And I think the real positive message is everyone, all citizens, can lead high-quality lives full of comfort. I mean, that sounds great. Sounds fantastic. We are, of course, going to explore what we need to get there. It also feels like that's quite a long way off. So why are we talking about this now? So I have a young son, and he's been learning to walk, and he needs me to hold his hand. And as soon as I don't do that, he sort of stumbles and he falls and he trips, of course. That was a few weeks ago, and now he doesn't need my help anymore. In fact, now I can't keep up with him. He's running around and he's got one speed, and that speed is fast. I think that's a lot like AI. It wasn't that long ago when we were working with even the most sophisticated algorithms, we still needed intelligent people to make sensible decisions around those algorithms. Otherwise, they would fall over. With the progression around large language models and generative AI more widely, we can sort of see that AI is growing up fast. So I think now is really actually a critical time to think about what do we want AI to be when it grows up? What are the principles that it should live by? So this might be all a bit theoretical, so let's bring some data into this. So we surveyed over 10,000 people across the world this year, and we asked them a number of questions, a lot of those around AI and trust in AI. And you can see some of the results here. So this is essentially the table on the left-hand side here is breaking down a few different areas, and it's asking those surveyed whether they think if we're using AI in those areas, should we have trust in that AI? So you look at, say, medical diagnostics, top of the list. 75% of people think we need trust in AI. That's great, but I suppose you could flip that around, and actually that means 25% of people seem to be happy that we don't have any trust in that area for medical diagnostics. So actually almost a bit worrying at the same time. So we asked an overarching question, which is on the right-hand side, to the group. So this question was, do they agree that we need international guidelines to enable the safe use of AI? And that's deliberately masked because I'd love to gauge the opinion in this room before we reveal the results. So let me ask that question to you. Put your hands up if you think that we need international guidelines around the safe use of AI. I think that's everyone. Maybe one or two without. I'd love to talk to you afterwards, but yeah, I think it's fair to say that's a landslide. But interestingly, outside of this room, out there in the wider world, 61% of people agree with that, which is it's not bad. Of course, it's more than half, but there's a huge gap, right, between a room full of data scientists understanding that this is a real problem that we need to address, and the wider world that hasn't seemed to have landed quite yet. So I think we need to think of ourselves as ambassadors in this area. How are we going to be able to communicate this to the wider, our stakeholders, society, everyone, that this is actually something we need to look at? So I think that's a perfect time for me to hand over to Shusma to really sort of dig into this further and explore the ethics around AI.
The poll that Joshua's done. And I'm really glad that pretty much everyone in this room agreed that we should have international standards around AI and guidelines. So I'm glad, but it might be like I'm preaching to the choir, but I'll reiterate the mission statement behind Society 5.0, especially the latter half, and how the noble ambition of resolving social problems by addressing needs regardless of locale, age, sex, or language is quite promising. But if we actually take a step back and consider reality, I think we are a bit far off. And AI right now sometimes feels like it's solely built for profitability, and the data that we have is sometimes regarded as the new oil, something to be monetized, an asset to be monetized. So with that in mind, I think we do need to undergo a bit of a shift in why we design technology solutions. So instead of just considering the principle of non-maleficence, that is, to do no harm, I think it's important we go beyond that and actually consider if our solutions benefit society and do good. And I think at its heart, this is the mission behind AI ethics as well. So ethics, it's been around a long time. It's the concept of determining between the right and wrong moral behavior. And you might say that AI is a technology, so in itself it should be neutral, it shouldn't have morality. But I don't think AI exists in a vacuum. I think we as makers of it are fallible, and because AI learns from our past behavior, it essentially holds up a mirror to society. And if we want to realize this Society 5.0, we're going to need to invest heavily in ethical use of AI. So I'll delve into that a bit deeper. But I want to start off by saying I think AI ethics is a bit of a buzzword. It gets thrown around a lot. A lot of companies are using it, speaking about it, but we might find that their products and services probably aren't backing it up. And I wanted to do a bit of demystifying before we get started. And I think AI ethics as well is being at risk of getting reduced into a simpler problem than it is. So to reflect on its complexity, I want to start with an example. Sometimes it feels like if you build a model and you make the predictions fair, you've done ethics and that's all you need to do. But it's actually more than that. It's considering the goal of fairness of outcomes alongside transparency and explainability of your outcomes. And of course, predictive performance, you're building a model for a reason. You want it to perform well while not compromising on the autonomy of our users, while protecting the privacy of our data subjects. So all of this is part of AI ethics. And this is probably just a selection of its characteristics. You could include sustainability, safety, and many more. But if we start with these, to add to the complexity, these are not easy to optimize, and I don't think it's actually possible to optimize all of them at once. They're in conflict with each other, and I hope the boxing gloves can help represent that. But as well as that, there's another complexity, the risk context. So if you were building AI systems for detecting spams, you would not need to look at it in terms of this kind of ethical scrutiny as you would systems that are used for healthcare, provisioning, and so on. So considering that, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on a few of those characteristics, starting from bias and fairness. And I hope this view I have here of a machine learning lifecycle is one that is familiar and one that you do follow when you build your AI models. But there is a side to it that I think is hidden, and that is the human bias that gets fed into all these stages. And there's almost a compound effect of this, where the human data is perpetuating the human biases, and while the machine learning models learn from it, we have this bias network that Margaret Mitchell, who's a researcher in this area, and coined the phrase bias laundering, which I think explains what this is best. And alongside this, if we consider transparency and explainability, it's focusing on the output. So people are seeing the output, but often the AI systems and its inner workings are masked by a black box. And I'd like to think of transparency and explainability as tools that shed light into this. And transparency helps answer the question of how did the model come to be? How should the model's predictions be used? So there are some really good papers on this regarding documentation and how you should disclose your work during AI development. Model cards and data sheets for data sets are good references to come up with these transparency artifacts while you're developing within your teams. And explainability, I think, helps answer the question of why. Why did people see this outcome, and why did the model make these predictions? And both of these are really important because without it, people won't know why a decision was made, and if they don't know that, they can't hold a decision maker to account for deciding on the wrong reasons or implementing a process unfairly. And lastly, I'm going to touch on privacy. So we looked at the outcomes, but for any of this to even be possible, you need some training data. And we've all been through the struggle of collecting data to train our models. So I wanted to go back to the start. First of all, information needs to be recorded, whether it's people, processes, or events. We start off there. And in order to get people to engage with our data collection tools and actually collect representative data, we need to maintain privacy processes like informed consent, protection. So informed consent would be preserving the user's agency over their own personal information. Protection would be protecting that and ensuring that it's only used in the ways that they've prescribed. And as practitioners in this field, it's important that we consider the need of the individual data point. I think if users don't engage, if we don't have their trust, and we don't collect those data points, we'd never have the entire data sets that we train on. But if we neglect these ethical values, that's when we end up with untrustworthy AI. I thought I'd give a couple of examples to that, and I'm sure they're not new to you. You've probably heard of Amazon's secret AI recruitment tool that showed bias against women in terms of downgrading their resumes whenever they use words like being part of a women's soccer team or anything like that. And we've also heard of instances where there's, I think, healthcare risk algorithms that had exhibited racial bias because they used a proxy as their target. They used health costs rather than health needs. And low-income households meant that they weren't being represented in this data set and they were just being forgotten by the system. As well as that, natural language processing isn't free from it. Words that have been trained from learning about relationships between words historically are heavily biased. Like man is closer to computer programmer than woman, and woman is closer to homemaker than other professions. And we've even seen a bit of that creep into ChatGPT. Now, it doesn't do that now if you try that question, but when it was first released, people did try and trip it up and asked, well, write a Python function for a good scientist, and that's only if you were white and male. If you were not that, you were not a good scientist. And that's not the only case. I think computer vision also suffers from this. Facial recognition especially has been known for being less good for people of color when predicting their faces, and we even saw an instance of Amazon's software falsely matching 25 members of the American Congress with mugshots in their databases. So now that I've scared you, I actually want to help and frame what an organization would need to operationalize ethics for innovation. I think there's two parts to it. Preventative ethics, so helping frame your design decisions to prevent harm and the negative consequences. But you could have proactive ethics too, so forward-looking and designing with intention to your values. And for that, I think you would need ethical impact assessments. We saw that ethics is really complex and it's all about trade-offs because there's so many competing goals. So if you do impact assessments before you start building your idea or your solution, you can start to identify the risks, put in place safeguards, and there's almost another life cycle alongside your machine learning iterations that you can put in place. So once you have your safeguards, you can evaluate if they're effective. If they're not, come up with action plans to mitigate against failures, and then, of course, monitor if the ethical path that you set out while you built your models continue in its lifetime in the marketplace. And lastly, I'd like to conclude with the importance of community participation. So I keep talking about understanding what are the values that you need. Ethics has a lot of complexity and trade-off. So although I am encouraged to see AI ethics being talked about a lot, I think it could benefit from a just many perspectives, I think. Let's go with that. Plurality was a bit hard to say the first time. But I think that would be better than this almost false dichotomy we have now, like where people can only be for or against AI. And because there's a lot of noise, I think there's a barrier of entry where people don't realize the good and the bad and come up with their own conclusions. So it would be great if we move towards society in the loop system, so take our human in the loop systems, but actually bring in stakeholders and users while we iterate on our machine learning models, because they have conflicting goals. When we just build it internally, we have common goals, and we're not seeing the way people might end up using these systems or what problem they actually want to solve in the real world. So it's important that we have our users' perspective from the start and consider their rights and ethical values as we build and iterate. But if everyone needs to be on the same page, we need a starting point. And I think standards serve as a good starting point for us. So that's trusted content, and there's a lot of common definitions to concepts there. So it means that we can communicate using the same language and understand each other's perspectives. And I've seen great leaps in that space with the International Standards Organization even making the AI concepts and terminology standard free to download. And there's communities that BSI is a part of, the Alan Turing Institute and NPL, that set up this AI standards hub where people can sign up and be part of a community forum of discussion around AI standards, where it needs to go, where it is now, and understand more of that. But these standards, the words inside them, I think take a life of their own when they get implemented. So it's important that while we read them, we also check for compliance against them. So I'm going to segue now to my colleague to help you understand why conformity assessments are required. So thank you for listening to me, and I'll let Andrea make his way.
Thank you. So to talk about conformity assessments, I'd like to first go back to the principles of Society 5.0 that Josh mentioned. So the idea is that we have full harmony between cyberspace and physical space, and that means that, for example, AI is fully integrated in our lives, and we can take a proper advantage of it. But so what is the requirement for such a productive and fruitful integration? Well, I'd say that trust is the real deal here. So if we don't trust AI, how can we use it to its full extent? How can we exploit its full potential? Because as you know, as we all know, AI is a very promising field. We see new applications coming out every day, but we also see its potential pitfalls, and Shusma mentioned some of them, and they are not without consequences. So conformity assessments in this very complicated landscape, let me just put it this way, our assurance to society that trust can be built between AI and between the physical and the cyber world. So what is a conformity assessment? Conformity assessment is about taking AI, taking in really nice magnifying glass, and try to delve into the inner workings of the AI system. So I reckon this is a very small font, but so the purpose of conformity assessment is about ensuring that certain fundamental properties like safety, reliability, the ability of upholding to ethical principle is ensured, and these principles are what is necessary to be the trustworthy relationship between humanity and AI. Conformity assessments are quite a lot of work. So it's about testing the AI model in a real-world environment or possibly in a simulated environment. It's about inspecting its details through the associated documentation. So if any of you has developed an AI model, you might know that there's never enough documentation about your AI system. So it's about documenting where the training data came from, how did you decide to split the data between training and testing, the training procedure, the performance metrics, the requirements from the stakeholders. So it's a very long list. And as I said, the objectives are, for example, ensuring that the AI model is fit for purpose. So is it good enough to perform the task that it was designed for? It's about understanding whether your system is affected by biases. So is the system discriminating against any subgroup of people in your target audience? It's about understanding how well your model performs under unforeseen circumstances. So it's about the resilience of the model. And as Shusma mentioned, it's about the transparency of the model. Can we understand how input was turned into into an output, so decisions by the AI system. And conformity assessments are not just about getting a certificate, a quality certificate that you can exhibit on the website of your AI product. They are about making a promise and ensuring to society that they can trust your AI product and they can use it safely. In doing so, they'll know that all the risks potentially associated with your AI system have been mitigated as far as possible. And AI is a very complex landscape, and so as much as AI is constantly evolving, conformity assessment need to keep up to innovation and new techniques that are invented every day. So I hope I was able to kind of give you this general picture, and you might now understand that performing conformity assessments doesn't come without challenges. So first of all, AI is nowadays very complex. The AI system that you might be using may be made of multiple machine learning models interacting one with the other. So the input of one model might be actually the output of another model. So their behavior is often not static but dynamic. And if you think about how many fields are now affected by AI applications, you might understand that the technical expertise required to properly assess AI in all those different fields is not something that we can ignore. And Shusma spoke about ethical principle and ethical AI, but we need to remember that there's no universal, uniform definition of what's ethical, because that might depend on society and culture, and we need to take that into account. And finally, as I said, AI is constantly evolving, and we need to make sure that while we do consistent assessment, we are also adaptive with respect to the different techniques out there, the different applications out there, and so we kind of make sure that we are inclusive. So in this scenario, I want to make a metaphor. So imagine trying to build a puzzle without a reference picture. That might be something that you can eventually do in the long run. It doesn't certainly come without challenges. So doing conformity assessments without any reference points for us would be exactly like that. And in this very complex scenario, standards are our reference picture. Standards are, you can think of them as our compass that helps us navigate into these very complex AI maze. And as I said, we need to make sure that one assessment is not completely different and is based on different principles from another assessment. So the evaluation needs to be consistent. And standards help us do that, and they do that by marking the boundaries of what is good AI. So the landscape that is traced by best practices, requirements that help us in assessing AI models. And like the standard that Shusma mentioned by the International Standard Organization and other standards that I'm going to mention in a few seconds, they offer global perspectives perspective, so not just limited to one country, one continent. So it's a worldwide vision. So I'd like to just give you a few examples of some standards that I care about. So we have the 24 or 27 standards on bias of AI systems. We have a standards on performance metrics for classification models. So you might, as you might guess, these are very technical standards. But we also have overarching standards regarding the overarching principles with how you build AI. So we have a standards that defines what trustworthiness for an AI system is. It tells you what could undermine trustworthiness and what you could do to ameliorate those threats. And finally, I would like to mention the 42001 standard on AI quality management systems, which regulates and gives you best practices for the entire design of AI models. So I'm a really bad drawer, but with this picture, I'd like to give the message that if conformity assessments were a house, standards are our bricks, our building blocks. So to wrap up this conversation, I would like to give you some more, let's say, practical examples of how conformity assessments might enter your life in Society 5.0 silently. So I imagine myself in Society 5.0. I wake up and I have a set of smart sensors that are captured by an AI system which provides, based on them, some health checks. And I'm going to be confident that those health checks are accurate because I know that a conformity assessment has ensured that, for example, model performance was assessed in the proper way. If I have a job, which I hope I do, I might have to commute to my workplace. And in Society 5.0, I may have a very smart AI assistant that performs real-time monitoring and prediction of traffic conditions. And in one case, it might tell me, take public transport instead of driving your own car because of current traffic conditions. And again, I'm going to trust that application because I know that in unforeseen circumstances, it will still make some meaningful and sensible suggestions. At work, I might be willing to do brainstorming sections with my colleagues, and an AI generative model might be there to provide us with real-time feedbacks, suggestions. And again, myself and my colleagues, will be confident to talk freely because we know that that AI language model underwent a privacy conformity assessment, assessing any privacy concerns related to it. In the evening, I might want to check on my elderly mom, and maybe she won't live close to me, so there will be a caregiving robot there, making sure she's safe and sound. And again, I will be confident that nothing bad is going to happen because I know that that robot underwent a conformity assessment for safety and reliability. Finally, before going to bed, and that is my cat. Finally, before going to bed, I might want to wrap up my day and get some mental health tips from my AI assistant, and I will be happy to receive those tips and feedbacks because I know that compliance to medical best practices was ensured for that system. So to finish up the conversation, I hope I convinced you that conformity assessments help you build trust between your AI technology and the population meant to use that technology. If trust is enabled, then a full integration of AI in our daily life is possible. And if we can really take advantage of the full potential of AI, of which we are all aware of, I'm sure we can improve the quality of our life and we can mitigate the risks that appear probably every every day. So this was our take on Society 5.0. You can scan this very nice QR code to look for our AI careers, and we will be happy to have conversations at the booth. And we hope you'll be able to join us to make AI a force for good. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And a lot of food for thought there. Right, we are not going to do Q&A for the session, but as you've heard, at BSI have a stand downstairs, which is very timely because we are going to break now for a short break. Go downstairs, get a cup of coffee, walk around, take pictures, post pictures on LinkedIn, tag it and tag the Data Science Festival, and there's a hashtag as well, DSF October, to get involved in the competition that for which the winners will be announced at 5 o'clock. And we'll all be back in all our rooms for the next talks at 3:15. That's 3:15. So we'll see you later.